You never cease to surprise me, reddish-pink person. I thought that recording room you were in exploded in space.
What can I say? I cast hard. You actually saved me,
It was a podcast emerald, wasn't it? But there's no way you could have activated the podcast control using an emerald that's fake. So, there's more to you than just talking with me. What are you, anyway?
What you hear is what you get. Just someone that loves talking. Talking about Sonic the Hedgehog.
I see, but I must let you talk. Your podcasting days are coming to a start.
Welcome to Let's Talk About Sonic, the podcast about the world's most famous hedgehog. Today we're wrapping up our three-part discussion on Sonic Adventure 2 by addressing the elephant in the room, should you choose to view it that way. The game's plot and narrative and cutscenes and execution and the fact that it's more of a narrative-focused game even compared to Sonic Adventure 1. I'm Crepe. I'm joined today, as always, by my lovely friend Mitt.
Hi, I'm also here.
We're both here. And I don't know. There's a lot of different ways we could tackle this to start.
Yeah.
I kind of just want to get out there and say that, Sonic Adventure 2's story has a lot of good going for it that I wouldn't say it doesn't get recognized often enough, but from the kinds of people who are frequently criticizing Sonic Adventure 2, they tend to gloss over the nice aspects, the little bits of well-executed tension, somewhat good or passable or enjoyable voice direction, line reading. These bits tend to get lost in the conversation, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sonic Adventure 2 is probably some of the best performances of the given voice cast. That was the first time, I forget who voiced Knuckles, but I know that it was a different voice actor between SA1 and 2.
Scott Dreyer in SA2
right.
and Heroes.
Okay, yeah. And he's got a lot more of a chiller kind of take on Knuckles compared to SA1. Ryan Drummond does a really good job. I forget if I've voiced it on the past couple episodes, but revisiting some of the cutscenes, he does a really good and nuanced take, which I really enjoy, and it makes me excited that he could return to the role.
Yeah.
He was given really good voice direction in SA2 that I think gets kind of slept on.
Right. I think people tend to mix it up with the fact that some other characters didn't get as good voice direction or had less experienced voice actors. In the case of Tails, Amy, or the obvious standouts. Rouge has some awkward moments, but for the most part, her voice actor, whose name I don't remember, fills the role fine in SA2. It's really Sonic Shadow and Eggman, Ryan Drummond, Dean Bristow, and I knew the name of Shadow's voice actor for SA2 and Heroes at one point, but I can't remember it offhand. But those three really steal the show.
Let's get some facts up, so that way we have them handy, so we're not just not dropping names, because I think we both find that an important thing. But yeah, you are right about specifically Shadow. His take, we're just kind of talking about voice direction now and not really getting into the meat of
get
this.
There. We always get
there. His Shadow's portrayal, which is driven home by his voice direction in SA2, is a lot different from how he is in every other game, which I think makes him considerably more interesting as a character.
Yeah, I would go as far as saying it's Shadow's voice in SA2, given by David Humphrey, thank you, yeah. IMDb, is soft even. He has a very soft voice compared to the voice direction other actors would get for portraying Shadow, especially especially Shadow's voice actor from Free Riders onward to the current day. I think I think he's been doing Shadow's voice up through Team Sonic Heroes, but I should double check that also. Pull up more facts. But I really enjoyed David Humphrey's performance. It's like you were saying about Ryan Drummond. It feels very nuanced in game.
Yeah.
That softness is definitely part of it. It makes his voice, even though it's kind of raspy and light in a way that's unnatural for most people. The softness kind of brings it down to earth a little more and makes it more believable a performance.
Yeah, it's a very he's very cocky in SA2 compared to all of the later games where he's just kind of aloof. He's very cocky and pompous, and it kind of rocks.
Yeah, I agree. There's a
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it. There's a degree of cockiness in a lot of characters' voices in SA2 and Heroes that it kind of gets lost in that era following it, where they picked up the 4Kids voice cast and some others.
Yeah.
It's not enough to ruin the performances of those games, but in conjunction with a lot of other problems, it's enough to ruin the performances in those games.
Yeah. I think it kind of stuck around into Heroes. And that's pretty much as far as it went, besides Sonic Battle, where it was just grunts.
That always reminds me that Ryan Drummond's compressed voice clips for Sonic and Sonic Battle always sounded really close to time to look at more voice actors. Goku's voice actor from Funimation.
I could see that.
Especially the pre-battle voice clip. Time to party always sounded really Goku to me. I think the pitch got lowered a bit when they were moved to the Game Boy Advance. Compressed like that. Yeah, sounds a lot like Sean Schemmel to me.
Yeah, understandable.
For reference, Kirk Thornton is the one who has been doing Shadow since Free Riders. Apparently he's been doing it for every game in English localization since Free Riders. It took him a while to find any footing, I think, with the character. At least any footing that was good, but it's fine. I feel like Shadow's never had a bad voice actor, at least.
Yeah, I think he's had less than desirable voice direction.
Yes. I've come around a lot on Jason Griffith's Shadow in recent years, especially times that he's pulled it out outside of his contract for fan stuff. Maybe it's just that he does it better these days. It could also, just like you were saying, come down to voice direction, but he sounds all right. It's been a while since he sounded really forced as Shadow. Yeah. I think he's found a different kind of comfort with the character.
Yeah, it's tough for me to say because from what I've heard recently of Jason, I feel like the three eras of Shadow voice personality is we probably should have talked about this last week. Is he starts off really cocky and pompous, which just directly contrasts Sonic in an interesting way. And then they kind of start leaning into him being really serious.
Mm-hmm. Very brooding.
Yeah. And now in the newer games, he's just comically aloof in a way that's just not, they're not really trying to make it interesting. It's mostly just a joke because I guess they don't have faith in Shadow's capacity to be an interesting character.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of talked about it before, how there's been a gradual transition to the characters becoming more two-dimensional in their writing and portrayal, but Shadow got hit the hardest, I think, because we've already had two-dimensional portrayals of Sonic before he had a solid voice cast and then a second solid voice cast and then a third.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
He got hit very quickly too, especially because it's the whole amnesia thing basically strips him of his arc.
Yeah.
He has to start all over. It's weird. I would say that the Sonic X cast is a different kind of two-dimensional from the most current cast.
Oh, agreed.
They're 2.5D. They're like they're not as good as like the peak in like Sonic Adventure 2, which is my personal peak for all of them. There's not really a ton of examples in between where I think there's like a nuance to their portrayals that's interesting.
Hmm.
Heroes is definitely like they didn't really try to have any nuance to anything. They're just kind of there to be very exaggerated. Like
Yeah,
Sonic is always happy-go-lucky, Shadow is always brooding. It works for Omega.
they're so there to be there that they
Yeah,
like have very simplified character goals.
yeah, for sure.
Now stick with me for this bit. I was gonna try to play off the 2.5D distinction for a second and be like, oh, they're this game of Sonic voice casts, and my brain reached to, in order, Yoshi's Story, which is not 2.5D, it's just 2D, and then Kirby's 64, which I'm like, that's not a fair comparison, and then to Mischief Makers, which is also not a fair comparison, and then to Sonic Rush, which is and then to Sonic Rivals, which again, both those games are in the franchise, so I feel like I kind of lost the bit a bit.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a 2.5D game out there that expresses how I feel about the 4Kids era voice cast.
They're the Super Mario 3D land of Sonic voice actors.
Oh, that's right. I was going to say they're the Yoshi's Crafted World of Sonic voice actors.
Oh boy, that might be a little too harsh.
As someone who hasn't played that game, it always looked very, very serviceable and not a whole lot above.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how my feelings on the 4Kids era voice cast kind of averages out. Like there are high points from select actors in select games. Like I enjoy specific scenes of Jason Griffith's portrayal of Sonic in Unleashed and in Black Knight, and then kind of not really anywhere else. And then I enjoy some of I don't remember Rouge's voice actor. Do you know? Because you're one of the few people I know who's like advocating for her portrayal of the character.
Let's check the behind the voice actor page I have open.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, wow, really? Okay. Her first voice actress was Lanny Minella, which I would always mistake for her second one, which is Kathleen Delaney, which is the one that I like. Kathleen Delaney voiced her basically Sonic X all the way through Sonic Free Riders is the first game where they did that.
I've always been mixed on Kathleen Delaney's performance, but I think that's just because the first one I always reach for in my memory is 06, and no one sounds good in that game.
Yeah.
I don't have a strong enough memory for how she sounded in Shadow, how she sounded in Riders, Riders Zero Gravity.
Yeah.
Man, there were not actually that many games with Rouge in them between 2004 and 2010.
I definitely like Kathleen Delaney the most. Part of that is definitely nostalgia, but another part of that is just I don't feel like the other actresses really capture the role in a way that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I understand wanting her to sound younger, but I feel like neither one really fits her character because she's very like able. Like she's not bad at her job. She's very competent at what she's doing, and I think Kathleen Delaney's performance matches that the best. Lanny Manilla's portrayal is probably my second favorite. Well, definitely my second favorite.
Of the three that there are.
Yeah. Just because it has moments where it works better, where she's kind of portrayed as being a little less mature about like wanting to have all of the pretty gems and all the stuff like that. Where they don't really do that much once Kathleen takes over the role.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, there's aspects to the evolution of the voice direction that ties directly into the evolution of the characters as they're explored in plot.
Yeah.
At the very least, Lanny Minella can do very little wrong.
Yeah.
It's funny how many different game franchises she's touched.
Yeah. Lanny Minella is like the pocket knife of of character voice actors. Of character voice of like video game voices. Apparently, she is 4 of the Koopalings.
Oh, yeah, I think I knew that somewhere. I think I knew that somewhere in the depths of my brain. God, she does a lot.
Oh
Anyone listening to this, go look at Lanny Minella's bibliography as a voice actor. It's far-reaching.
She's Ivy?
I think I knew that also.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's a lot.
She is also, of course, the definitive Omocho voice. The perfect equilibrium of annoying and not annoying, which has not been met since.
If you know her for nothing else, is probably Lucas in Smash Brothers.
Yeah, Lucas in every game that every Smash game that has Lucas. She was Pit in Brawl.
Oh yeah, it's true.
She's Lynn also, which I just found out. Pretty good. I feel like we have
right. She was Luke in Professor
really?
Layton.
Oh right, yeah. I feel like if this is a very low energy podcast, I personally apologize because it's been an interesting weekend. For me specifically.
Mitz had a lot of computer trouble.
Yeah, I have been running back and forth halfway around my corner of Brooklyn to get my computer working in as quick a time frame as possible. Shoutouts to Micro Center.
Any help you can get.
Yeah. Which is going to make it a little difficult for me personally to jump in on the intricacies of the Sonic Adventure 2 story, because I feel like I have knowledge of like very specific points, but not like the kind of groundwork that connects everything.
I got a couple of things we could dive in on then. There's a bigger overarching talking point I want to bring up, but I think I'll first start with like, you ever think about how SA2 has the greatest opening cutscene in the franchise and some of the best closing cutscenes for the individual stories?
That's true.
Like, the Dark Side story opening is fine, but like, good God, the scene for the Hero Side story was Sonic in the helicopter, breaking a piece of it off, shooting off like 2 great one-liners, and then falling several hundred feet to a steep San Francisco street and just streetboarding the whole way down the city. Like, I extended that a little bit into the gameplay of City Escape, but like they're so closely related, it's seamless.
Yeah.
The feeling of the end of that cutscene going into you controlling Sonic for the first time in the game.
Yeah, definitely.
It's fantastic. The energy of it, the music. Even if in the dub it opens up with some really confusing line voice overlap between the 2 people on the helicopter, it's fine. It still works really well. It sells Sonic's character great for the whole rest of the game.
Yeah. Thinking about it, I do actually like how both the Hero and Dark Side stories just kind of drop you off in the action. Sonic's is choreographed super good. Like you said, it's probably one of the best, if not the best, opening cutscene in the whole franchise. The Eggman one is pretty good. It's good on paper. It probably could have been boarded a little better, but like Eggman storming a big military base is a little more. Yeah, it's a cool idea. It's just, I think visually it's a little more high concept than what they're doing with Sonic. Because with Sonic, it's like, it's pretty clear what is going on. Like, Sonic is captured by the government and he's breaking out. Why is he captured by the government? You'll find out when you're finished with the level while you're breaking out. So that, like, it works, but what is Eggman breaking into? Because it just looks like machinery, right? There's nothing
Hmm.
really that necessarily defines it immediately as being the government, because it just looks like something that Eggman could have built, except like it's not as exaggerated as like if you're going into SA2 from SA1, um, as his base was there, but it's still like it's just a bunch of metal machinery stuff. You don't know what it is.
Yeah, and the other thing there is the government didn't exist as like an entity or concept in the Sonic games before SA2, and it's
Mhm.
big to SA2's plot, but opening up in media res without like telling you too much about where Eggman is going into his first level uh can make it seem kind of vague, like you were saying.
Yeah, I was thinking I did like on a whim just like watch some of them. It was either last night or the night before, and what I thought once it got to the cutscene after the level where he's tapping into the console, he narrates the whole thing,
Oh yeah.
which I wonder how you would go about like presenting that better, because you can't tell right away what he's really like doing if he wasn't talking about it, which like it's fine that he's talking about it. I do think it's an important little like nugget of information that he says what the password is.
Hmm.
Um but I almost wonder, like, he's just talking aloud to himself.
Direct parallel to Tails cutscene following City Escape.
Yeah.
I feel like they could do a lot of work just by having some good line of sight camera angles between Eggman and then cut to a shot of what he is looking at, which is the terminal he's going to go type at.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
cuts to the screen he's going to be looking at, like little bits of setup of like, oh, he's trying to retrieve something. Uh, that sort of stuff can be communicated pretty implicitly without it having to be spelled out, without it having to be more detailed than that until it actually gets to showing the exact thing that he's getting.
Yeah.
Now, the ending cutscenes. uh, it's we were just watching the one for Shadow and Sonic before their second fight before the end of the Hero and Darkseid stories.
Yeah.
And it still holds up pretty well. There are like maybe two spots, one for each character, where the line reading is a little strange or a little hokey, but the whole thing is still sold pretty well. Like these feel like two characters who have grown to have a more nuanced understanding of each other than they expected to have through repeat encounters they didn't expect to have. It reads well. And also I just like their dumb exchanges.
Yeah, it's like an actually good cutscene. I think I'm here's the truth bomb that I'm dropping on this podcast tonight is Sonic having some semblance of like self-seriousness is cool, and Sonic Adventure 2 does it the coolest
Yeah.
because later in the franchise they do it too seriously. Like Sonic 06 is the franchise taking itself way too seriously in a way that's not fun. It's not fun the way Sonic 06 does it. But the way Sonic Adventure 2 does it is really fun because it's just more nuanced. It's like a more three-dimensional approach to the conflict going on. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous, but that's the fun part of it. And like they're taking it seriously because they want you to take it a little seriously because there's stakes to the characters. Like the premise of the story is obviously completely ridiculous. That's the idea. But like as long as you're getting invested, it doesn't matter how stupid it is. If you're hooked, you're hooked. They win.
Yeah. They win, you win too.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't it it's a big part of why I don't find a lot of the narratives and cutscenes, the way they're executed in a lot of the subsequent Sonic games, to be as easy to get hooked on.
Yeah.
There's a real degree to which Sonic and Shadow and Eggman and Tails and Rouge to a degree are invested in the ongoing events because they all have specific character motivations that drive them, that like makes it either easy to relate to them as onlookers or easier to understand what they want out of any given situation and latch onto the events as more character driven stories than event driven. Because even though there's a pretty strong aspect of events driving the plot in SA2, it feels like it's more important how the characters choose to react to events and how they react to each other in response to events.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure how much that makes sense because there's this whole subset of thought in literary criticism and analysis of whether a plot is more motivated by things happening or characters making things happen or characters causing things to happen in response to things happening. And Sonic Adventure 2 is more in that third camp, I guess, but it still leans a little bit in the second one of characters having intertwining and contrasting and conflicting motivations. Sonic the whole time is just trying to figure out what's going on, and that's a very simple character motivation, but it functions really well in a lot of different plots and genres. So it's a perfectly fine building block for a character, and especially combined with his tendency to like get into a situation and then look for the simplest way out of it, even if it's the most difficult or most flashy way. Pairs well with like wanting to understand what's going on, because he'll find himself in more and more situations like that where he can show off his other character traits. Eggman the whole game is trying to be in control of everything in order to execute his plan, and the more things go out of his control, the more he steps in and stomps things down. So it allows him to show off his character traits of wanting to dominate the situation, wanting to be intimidating, and secure his victory by any means, basically. And then Shadow is just, man, how do you put what Shadow wants in SA2, actually?
I don't know. Because
he expresses one thing, which is revenge for Maria.
Yeah.
Like, that's a fairly obvious one. It's at the forefront. It's what a lot of people think of because it's in his first major character moment if you're playing the Dark Side story, is him announcing that he's going to get revenge on the human race. But like, it's also kind of superficial because he is motivated by some sense of revenge and making right in the world, but I think a deeper motivation there is that he had a deeper motivational analysis is that he has some want to write something in the world or portray himself in a certain way, and he doesn't care who he associates with to do that.
Yeah.
Because he has such a disdain for humanity as a result of his own personal trauma that he's like, yeah, I'll help you threaten them. I'll help you kill them. And makes that last point like a little quieter, I guess. But it's there. Because Eggman doesn't really want to go through with his threat. Like, multiple times in the story he seems like he does, but the fact that he has a change of tune for the last story kind of indicates that the whole time he really only wanted to set up a world level threat, a world crisis level threat, just to make sure he got his way.
Yeah.
To have that in his back pocket, not his back pocket, to have that as something he can show, like, I could do this, and the fact that I could should let you give me the leeway I want to do whatever I want. But I'm not going to do it, because then what am I going to have?
Yeah.
Whereas Shadow is completely on board.
Which is an interesting prospect, because they don't really play into the fact that, like, Eggman and Gerald are related
Mm-hmm.
as a means of Shadow's motivation, because Shadow's main he just mostly wants to get revenge at Gun, if anyone else, or like the government.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, he wants to take that out on the rest of humanity, but there's not a there's not a stated reason why Eggman has to be that means to the end, besides the fact that, you know, Eggman freed him, but it's never elaborated upon beyond that, when at any point Shadow could have just gone off on his own, as he does, and then just not come back.
Yeah. I
Rouge's
went into this whole
placement.
thing with like a pretty confident stance, and I still feel it for Sonic and Eggman, but I'm not, like, the more I think about it, the less I'm sure that Shadow has like a really clear, well-defined motivation in SA2, or at least one that has much nuance or sheds light on the kind of person that he is.
Yeah.
He wants one thing, he seeks it out through any and all avenues that are in front of him, and it almost comes to pass, and he's just standing there.
Yeah. That that almost makes the weird, like, I'll grant you a wish thing that he puts on Eggman really weird and redundant. Like, why doesn't he just immediately leave when he gets freed? There's no reason for him to stick around at all and do anything besides just go around of his own volition.
I think a lot of Shadow's presence in the game is really sold by his voice acting and like, not writing as in a general sense, but writing in terms of scripting.
He's
Like,
a really good Star Wolf.
Oh yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Because, like, he really just, like, loves messing with Sonic. That, like, makes his day. So he's so enamored by how good Sonic is at, like, screwing him up, and Sonic's just, like, completely bewildered by the fact that he exists, that they're just, like, they both have such, like, a weird chemistry in that way.
Yeah.
It's there's a competition to it, for sure.
Ooh, competition is a great word to use, actually. I think that,
like,
that states a lot of, like, what their relationship is the whole game.
honestly, I don't want most of this podcast to be like, this is how it should have been.
Yeah.
But, like, they should have had it so Eggman was the driving factor for most of the story, but once Shadow's own motivations outpace Eggman's, it should have been Shadow. Like like you said, Eggman just wants everything under his control, but Shadow has a more personal and directed motivation. Even if it's just revenge, it's still clear what he wants to do with the power that he is being given by Eggman.
Mm-hmm.
That he technically isn't explicitly being given by Eggman. He's just along for the ride because he also wants to see whatever it is, the thing that Eggman wants to do, which, like, he just wants to take over the world. He doesn't want to kill anybody. He doesn't care. As long as everyone's following his orders, then it doesn't matter what happens.
Kind of tangential for that for a moment, but it just flashed in my brain. There's a lovely contrast between not just the way Eggman is portrayed in SA1 versus SA2, but the way he's portrayed in SA2 versus them covering anything related to SA2 in Sonic X.
Yeah.
Like, Sonic X, of course, is much more lighthearted as a whole, but that tone absolutely bleeds into the Sonic Adventure 2 based arcs in the show. And on a micro level, that can be partially attributed to Mike Pollock's performance as Eggman and where he'd settled into the character at that time and what his voice direction was. Dean Bristow is so cutting in SA2 the whole game. Even when Eggman has these brief moments where his character falters a little bit because someone or something has gotten the better of him in a way that he just can't handle in that moment, or he's scratching his butt, the voice performance the whole time makes it clear that he wants others to see him as a threatening figure, so he's going to keep being threatening.
Yeah.
He doesn't really let that drop at any point.
Which also adds nuance to the way Sonic sees him, because that just plays home how Sonic is just his antithesis.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, he will never take him seriously. That's the bit.
That's
which
why
just
he
makes
walks
the
the scene.
Yeah, that's why he walks in and goes, "You've turned into a big-time villain, Doctor."
Yeah, because, on some level, it does sell Eggman's accomplishment, going behind Sonic in this way that's really dangerous to his friends and thus dangerous to him.
Yeah.
At the same time, Sonic is still playing him down as much as he can.
Yeah.
I like that Sonic almost uses that as a way to cope with the situation. At least that's how I've always read it. Not even just in this scene, in any Sonic game, that part of the reason Sonic doesn't take Eggman seriously is because it makes it easier for him to handle the situation. It makes it easier for him to shut out any actual fear or worry or anxiety and just deal with what's happening.
Yeah.
It's kind of fake it till you make it.
I feel like
Because if you don't believe well, maybe that's not the right way to put it. If you continually make yourself believe that there's not a threat in the room, then you're fine.
Yeah.
You can handle anything.
I definitely do. I definitely understand. I just feel like with his specific portrayal in SA2, I'm having trouble seeing where that weakness would play in. Because if anything, I would see that being his character flaw would be his temper. I don't think Sonic in SA2 would necessarily break down in a way. He would just kind of fly off the handle, which does end up giving you a very toxic Sonic, which is uncharacteristic for him depending on how you spin it. But I think still. Go ahead.
No, you were still talking.
I guess it's still interesting because paired with Ryan Drummond's performance, it's a side of him that we don't normally see, because he's just constantly getting bothered by the cops, and he straight up says that.
Yeah, that's true. I'm seeing my reading less from a perspective of he could break down and more of a this is the kind of person he's willed himself to be by this point. It's not a character weakness. It's I'm not trying to read a character weakness into it. I'm trying to read how someone becomes the kind of person Sonic the Hedgehog is.
Okay.
It's more he's been doing this so long that's just his mindset. Yeah.
Because I think that's definitely very similar to his portrayal in the movie, where it is very upfront that's just that is actively a front that he's putting on.
I'm not even sure if I'd want to see that angle explored too much.
Yeah.
In games.
I feel like there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it also feels unnecessary because it does add an additional dimension to him, but I don't know if I need it or even want it.
Oh yeah. The temper's funny though.
Yeah, I'm perfectly content with him just not always being laid back, power of friendshipy, which is immediately what Heroes does in the very next game.
Yeah.
I like him having like a limit to his patience, which is true to his character even in the old games. Like that's always been the bit.
It's something they did well in the storybook games, even contrasting with Unleashed coming out between them, which was a much more laid-back Sonic most of the time.
Hmm.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up about SA2's story is the government, which I kind of touched on before, as it didn't exist in the Sonic universe or its portrayal in any of the games
They're here now.
before SA2, and now it's here. As well, it's a lot of things. I get the feeling that, at the very least, Gun, but kind of the idea of a governmental institution at all for Sonic was introduced in SA2 to give Eggman something to fight against primarily, because he does need something, because Sonic's not out here making his own robots for Eggman to bop, and they're definitely not going to make a game where you play as Eggman shooting a bunch of woodland creatures. It's a little much.
Yeah.
Even for the time, even for the period in gaming as a whole, that would have been a little much.
Yeah.
But
I think it's like
I
I think they wanted to have a sort of like they wanted to have some sort of faceless government for like the two specific major events that happen, which is Sonic breaking out of the helicopter and being chased by the government, like in just a nebulous he's being chased by the cops way. Like he's being mistaken for Shadow, which has the town's cops angry at him. And for Shadow's backstory, so they could pin what happened to Maria on something, and then it snowballed so ridiculously out of control that they had to have a president.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's correct also. I like to speculate on how Sonic Adventure 2's plot formed to begin with, given the early trailer we have for the game that only showed Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman as playable characters, and clearly at some point after that they got enough backlash for not showing Tails at all that they were like, we gotta do something about this, huh? And made Shadow more prominent, maybe made Rouge at that time, if not made her more prominent, and then added Tails as a playable character, who was probably also in the plot beforehand. So it could have been they took three characters who were non-players in terms of gameplay, but major players in the plot, and were like, okay, there you go. Control them now. But I like to speculate on where Sonic Adventure 2's plot may have been at that stage, because that's where I'm coming from with the whole thing of Gun being introduced to give Eggman something to fight. I think you're definitely right that it was integral to the conception of those other events. I have to wonder if those events were conceived after like the necessity of giving Eggman enemies to face. It really depends on if SA2's development started more with the narrative or more with the gameplay. It's hard to tell with that era because it was such a narrative-driven period for major video games, especially coming off the heels of Sonic Adventure 1, which was much more about its plot than any previous game in the franchise, etc., etc.
Yeah.
This sort of thing gets talked about everywhere, but I just like to think about it. It's endlessly fascinating to me that Sonic Adventure 2 did not start with Shadow intended as a playable character.
That is an interesting approach to it that I've never really considered. Just like that they were literally just going to be the only three characters, and then they turned NPC characters into full characters. Because Knuckles has no reason to be in the story.
Yeah, when you think about it. I wonder what their angle was to begin with. That's also part of why I feel like the plot might have come secondary to the decision to have three playable characters.
Yeah.
Because people have already talked about how the three gameplay styles, we talked about this, the three gameplay styles in SA2 were direct offshoots of the three most distinct and relatively successful gameplay styles present in Sonic Adventure 1.
Yeah.
In terms, at least, of what made them distinct in terms of control or objective, without being fishing and without being Amy.
Yeah.
And if that was their angle to begin with in developing Sonic Adventure 2, then I could totally see the story coming a bit second to that, and them having to decide a bunch of things like, again, who does Eggman fight? What is Knuckles doing? What does he get out of the plot? And what wraps him in what would be otherwise just another conflict between Sonic and Eggman again.
Yeah.
And if going off that, it was just those three characters to begin with, and then when they added Tails, they were like, we're not going to dedicate development time and resources to developing a fourth gameplay style for this. Let's split up the levels that we have between characters. We'll make Tails Eggman's equivalent, etc., etc. At that point, maybe Shadow became more prominent, or Shadow existed already. I'd like to look into that sometime, actually. I wonder how much developer interview stuff there is on like the order of events in Sonic Adventure 2's development when Shadow was conceived.
Yeah. Because I also can't shake the feeling that, like, Rouge also isn't very vital to the story of Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah.
Mostly because her motivations are weird and unclear.
Her motivations are intentionally muddled for a while, with more superficial motivations, and then when the less superficial motivations are revealed, it almost comes out of left field, and then again muddles what she does for the rest of the game, because it feels like she should be making different decisions for her position.
Mm-hmm.
She goes from wanting to collect gems, which, who knows, in the context of SA2, could have been entirely a front before it ended up becoming a major defining part of her character in other games and appearances. She goes from that to being a government operative spy, trying to collect data on a program they already had data on. Presumably.
Yeah.
Unless all of the data on the BioLizard and the Ultimate Lifeform project was just left on the Ark for 50 years. That's something I don't know if they touch on, was the Ark just in orbit or floating aimlessly through space for 5 decades?
I mean, I guess, right? Like, where else would it be?
Yeah. And just left alone that whole time. There are some strange gaps in SA2's plot.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that, like, a lot of the gaps in the plot tie into the Ark and the characters who are aboard it, because it's kind of really pivotal for the overall story.
Yeah. And it's funny.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Nah, you go ahead. I've been talking a bunch.
It is funny how important it is there and how unimportant it becomes for the rest of the series.
It's important for one more game, then never again.
Yeah.
And it took them 4 years to get there.
Oh boy.
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about early on when we started talking about SA2 for this podcast, of how much SA2 laid down for the franchise and how much of it was kept and how much it was left behind.
Mm.
The setting is part of that, the gameplay is part of that, the presentation is part of that. And when it comes to the setting, SA2 feels like even more of an outlier, because there's just one other game, Shadow the Hedgehog, that follows up on any of the locale's direct plot and plot consequences of SA2. That's kind of it.
Yeah, and it only does it like retroactively. It doesn't really progress anything.
Yeah.
Like I
Not
guess
that
it's interesting to bring up like the Black Arms and how Shadow was created, but like, did we really need to know?
it wasn't really a question people were asking.
And they never came back anyway, so.
Yeah. And also, Shadow the Hedgehog wasn't really answering any questions people were asking.
Yeah.
I have one other thing, which is talking about my favorite little theory that I mentioned last episode, but I guess I could, I guess there might be more detail I could go on or have more of a branching discussion from, which is the theory that Sonic being mistaken for Shadow, at least from the government's perspective, was absolutely a cover-up to keep people from knowing about Project Shadow, which I feel is substantiated absolutely enough just by the fact that Shadow was sealed away in a government facility.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they knowingly have him, are doing nothing with him, aside from presumably keeping him under some level of monitoring, and making sure people don't know about him.
I like this theory. Although if it like if they were to take this and like run with it, then they would have to give the government more presence, and that would basically mean that they do have to acknowledge that the government is the true antagonist in SA2 and not like a Robotnik of any kind.
I want that game.
True.
I would love that, because it's not like SA2 doesn't already have a pretty strong foundation for an anti-authoritarian Sonic stance.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be great if they leaned into that more.
Agree.
It's like already a big chunk of the basis for Sonic's antagonistic relationship with Eggman is that he's anti-authoritarian. He's also a friend to the environment, but he's also an anti-authoritarian. So I don't know, I think that explains a lot of why Dr. Eggman is the kind of character who would be a villain in the Sonic franchise specifically.
Yeah. It's because this is making me think of how this is like somewhat related. It's mostly just related to Eggman's character. When I read the Sonic and Mega Man crossover, it portrayed Eggman and Wily as being similar in motive, but very different in philosophy. Where Eggman will do whatever he needs to meet that end goal to a cartoonish degree, whereas Dr. Wily has morals. And I can understand where that's coming from, but I don't necessarily know if it's true.
I want you to keep talking on this, but I do want to interject that part of that for sure is just because of the way Eggman was being depicted in the comics specifically, and like the legacy that his writing had, for better and worse.
For sure. Because, like, I think if Eggman is supposed to just be like an entrepreneur guy, like he is a villain because he will go through any capitalistic means to see his end, which includes, decimating forests and kidnapping woodland creatures and all that. So to an extent, he would be a quote-unquote ally of the government until that the government stops being an ally with him and he becomes on his own.
Yeah.
So I don't see why... Like, they do actually portray him in this way whenever there's a greater evil, where he just kind of, like, buckles and preserves the world for the greater good, but also kind of his good, because he wants the world. It's not like he wants to destroy it. But I guess that's an angle that I want to see more of, is like a somewhat realistic at least like a grounded Eggman.
Yeah.
Where like he's smart enough to recognize that, which that does require more ulterior structure to the world that may not be necessary, like the government.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because there's such real groundwork for the kind of character you're describing in terms of real life people who suck.
Yeah, which is why it would be interesting to see it explored in Sonic. That's the way you add the nuance to their characters, is that you just do that. But for whatever reason, they don't. Even though I feel like it's like on the wall, it's kind of hard to miss.
It's not even subtext.
Yeah,
It's text.
maybe that's why. Honestly, realist possible talk. Maybe that's why the characters are so flat now. They're just not seeing that specifically. Like they're just taking the characters removed from the thematic element of the entire franchise.
Oh,
which is
yeah.
why nothing feels like it fits anymore.
No, I think that's an accurate reading. It's they tried to quote unquote go back to like thematic roots in Sonic Lost World by bringing back the egg capsules and having Sonic's goal literally just being busting animals out of Eggman's confinement again.
Mm-hmm.
And then go on to whatever other plot details they wanted to do, because they sure wanted to add new villains who aren't interesting and have no depth. But
Yep.
like they tried to have that kind of groundwork, and it didn't stick at all, and it also didn't mean anything for the plot of that game, and it also didn't mean anything for the setting of that game, and it also didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So they
Also,
really have disengaged with that whole angle, which Sonic's themes were built on.
Yeah. Also, if you were to apply that specific theming to Sonic Lost World and give characters like the Deadly Six more of a subtext, given, you know, their context on the Lost Hex, you kind of get a really not great theme going on there. You kind of don't want subtext where it's about Eggman controlling things that are native to a new area, and you have to stop them.
Yeah. There's two layers to that. One is the thing you just mentioned, which is literally positioning slaves as the antagonists. But then the other thing is, if they were overt about it, it would really mess with Eggman's marketability as a character.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I mean, the whole thing is that Sonic Lost World's plot is super ill-conceived as a whole, and adding any real depth to what is already there subtextually makes it worse.
Yep.
So they just shouldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
One of their villain characters is just the girl.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of their characters are just the adjective, like specifically the one singular adjective in like a bad Saturday morning cartoon way.
Yeah, it just bothers me so much specifically that like a game that came out in 2014 for a beloved video game franchise, one that already has maybe not a large amount, but at least a solid chunk of enjoyable, distinct female characters, is like, alongside the old person and the fat person, which is not an archetype, and the emo person, will have the girl, you know, the gender. Yeah, that's a personality.
Yeah. We designed these characters. You'll see them in the Olympics. Don't worry about it.
You'll see them in the Olympics. You'll see them in Sonic Force's speed battle.
You could tell they got really inspired by the Koopalings.
Yeah, it's very transparent, and they took it in such an odd direction. I don't even like that the Koopalings only has one girl, and that she's also pretty vain in most depictions.
Yeah, honestly.
But at least they're not like overt about it.
You know that it... Actually, okay, hold on. I would say if the Koopalings could talk, it would just be the same. However, they do talk in several games, and they're actually completely inconsistent with their characterizations.
Yeah, it's also part of it. Is that We've only had the Deadly Six for one game. It was a bad one. They talked a lot, and they shouldn't have, and it colored every appearance they had subsequently. The first time the Koopalings showed up, and the second time, and the third time, they said nothing, and it was fine. And all we had to go on was what they looked like and what they did, and we could project anything we wanted onto them. So then when they started talking, it didn't matter as much.
Yeah.
But you can't go back that easily on the Deadly Six. They've tried. They're trying in the IDW comics right now, and all the people I've heard talk about them are saying, yeah, they're better than they are in the games. I'd still have to read it to believe it myself, but like,
Yeah.
they can't be that much better, right? Like, on a fundamental level, the associations they have design-wise and interpersonally as a group predispose them to be uninteresting.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think it's also like it makes me think of how several Sonic games of late have added totally new characters that are unrelated to anything else in a like just complete vacuum new characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they are like the epitome of that, where they're from a place that does not matter anymore. Their origin is a game. It's not a place. They will never go back to the Lost Hex. It exists there to be a video game. It's nothing else. So like the Deadly Six, especially more than like Infinite, who's like a one-off, who's never gonna come back anyways. They're so removed. I don't see the value in bringing them back. I just don't want to see them again. Like the way you make use of these characters is by using them better. I don't want you to.
That's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. I'm not interested in a more nuanced Deadly Six performance.
I'm just not interested in the Deadly Six.
I'm just not interested in the Deadly Six. I was thinking for a second, they sure did try to make the Lost Hex matter to some degree by like having it come back in runners, like all the levels in runners being levels from the Lost Hex and Lost World, and then the most recent thing being in Team Sonic Racing, where they have Sky Road, but Sky Road in that game doesn't even look like Sky Road in Lost World, so it doesn't matter.
Isn't it like literally over Rooftop Run? It's just like the
Yeah.
Rainbow Road of that game.
It is. There was a period where I thought the music they had for the Sky Road track was a remix of the Sky Road music in Lost World, and it's not.
Well, there you go.
Nothing to do with it. It's a completely original track, and I like it. But what was the point of having the tying in name?
It is more literal now.
Yeah. Man, Lost World is boring. At least we have Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah, that's true. We had like a good tangent there. Like even though it was completely unrelated to Sonic Adventure 2, I think it's interesting talking about the importance of the greater anti-authoritarian nature of Sonic
Mm-hmm.
as a whole and how it's kind of fallen apart. Because when you mentioned that, like, oh yeah, they went back to their roots for Sonic Lost World, I immediately thought, didn't they do that with Colors? And the reason why I thought that is because that is more thematically appropriate. Because it's at least more like, it has more of like an ecological element to it. Like, what Eggman is doing is basically the plot of Sonic CD, but bigger.
Yeah.
And I will say that up until this moment, I forgot that his like big evil beam is mind control and not just like sucking the energy out, which would be better. So like the only part that's like really just zeroes in on the theme is Planet Wisp, which is probably why everyone likes Planet Wisp.
That in the music.
Well, yeah, of course.
It also it's funny, the parts of the plot that tie in most of that theme in terms of like cutscenes anyway don't even happen in Planet Wisp.
Yeah.
The bits where the game focuses on the fact that Eggman is confining aliens like he's done with small animals before happen in Tropical Resort at the top of the game, and then at Asteroid Coaster, which most players will likely play last, just because the game has a really clear progression, even though it doesn't force you to play every zone in a specific order.
Mm-hmm.
So you get that little bit at the beginning, that Eggman's sucking the power out of these little aliens, and then you get a little bit at the end where you see the exact process by which he's doing that, and how scary it is. After you've spent 4 zones with mostly lighthearted tone of just Eggman making quips over the PA, Sonic and Tails making worse quips to each other and about each other before and after bosses, and you just kind of forget that the Wisps are anything other than Sonic's new little friends who give him cool powers that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And then they matter again for the plot. And so that ecological theme doesn't come up much in Sonic Colors' like overall feel, even though it's important to the text.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. It's something.
Also,
it's the reason I don't really associate it much with Sonic Colors, even though it's true of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. It's also why their later appearances in other games makes no sense whatsoever.
Yup, doesn't matter a lick. I like that they tried to explain it in most recent titles. I think it was like Team Sonic Racing or the game that came. One game since Colors tried to explain what. Oh, it was Runners. Runners in one of its story sequences explained that the Wisps liked Sonic and his world enough that they were like, let's go hang out down there instead. Woo. And that's all the explanation you get.
Yep. It's so strange. This would be a better conversation for like a Sonic Colors episode.
Yeah.
It's so weird how they keep bringing the Wisps back because they're so thematically tied to the plot of Colors that like it's so weird bringing them back like they're just power-ups. They're not like, first of all, that's what the shields are for. Like, not that you can't have power-ups other than the shields, but the shields exists as like non-specific power-ups that you can have in whatever environment because they're just Sonic-y things that are there.
And they
It's like,
give Sonic abilities.
yeah, those are that's like the immediate equivalent to something like a power pellet or like a fire flower. Just like something like that that's like around. And it doesn't really have any like thematic purpose for being there. It's just there because that's all it needs to be. But like when you have the Wisps and you tie them so closely to the story of the game that they debut in, you bring them back outside of that, doesn't make any sense.
I'd like to posit something that's kind of funny. And I will laugh my butt off if this trend continues into whatever game they show off next and put out next. But from Sonic Colors to Lost World to Forces, there's this interesting thing going on where they introduce an element of the Sonic world that's very tied to what is exactly happening in that game only, and then are like, hey, that thing from the last game, we brought it back. They did that with the Wisps. They did that with the Deadly Six, or at the very least, from Lost World to Forces with Zavok. And then into Team Sonic Racing also. Man, that's a whole other thing. We're getting way off track, but God, I hate that Zavok's in Team Sonic Racing. He shouldn't be anywhere.
Yeah.
Not the least of which because I hate him, but because Eggman enslaved him and his friends? Why is he helping him? What happened? I get you wanted more villains? This is not how you do a villain team? This is how you get those like old school cartoons where there's a bunch of different villains who are not working together, but they are all problems for the main character. And sometimes they come together, but most of the time they have different means and ends and end up in each other's ways. And that's more interesting, I think, for the kinds of villains that Sonic has set up.
Yeah. Sonic needs a Sinister Six. I don't care about that Deadly Six.
Yeah. Gives me the Sonic villain team that crumbles 10 days after forming.
Yes.
because of power struggles and hatred of each other's motives and ways of doing things.
IDW is kind of doing that. There is a villains miniseries that is basically that.
That's true. Which,
Although it's more like Friends of Mutual Hate for Robotnik. So it's you know.
ah man, I wish Friends of Mutual Hate had a better like catchy acronym to it because it's such a great phrase.
Yeah.
It's making me think of Friends of the Table because I'm still listening to their sixth season Partisan, and there's a faction / group in their game named the Friends of Gur Sevrak, and like Friends of Mutual Hate has a similar cadence to it. That's nice. It's good.
Yeah. If we were to tie it all back right now in a nice little bow, I think that's why the thematic element of everything makes Sonic Adventure 2 interesting, because it is it's the logical progression of like the base level Sonic theming, where it's like, okay, Eggman is like a rogue entrepreneur capitalist dude who's just making humongous cities or whatever. Like he's just making a bunch of robots and he has his factories. He's not the only one.
Right.
And they are all enabled by this by the government. So the greater evil is not Eggman.
Right. Even if he's the most notable one to act on the things that he wants, that he's using the societal system we all operate under to achieve, because it expressly allows that to happen. Even if he's the only one acting on it, especially in dangerous ways, he's still not the source of it.
Yeah. Which SA2 kind of it didn't touch upon that per se. That's like the whole gun plot is like corrupt government thing, but they don't necessarily tie it in a way that matters to Robotnik and his motives. Because like the way you have that happen while continuing to escalate Robotnik as the main villain is by making his like goal of Eggman Land change alongside the landscape of the franchise and the thematic element of it. Like his current means to an end are like robots and stuff. And in SA2, that's all of his grandfather's stuff, which is accurate to that statement. That's a different means to the same end. He's not as focused on robots.
Yeah.
So that's how you keep him interesting, is that you keep that maintained goal, and then when there's things that threaten that aren't Sonic, that's how you create a greater threat and a mutual interest.
Exactly. That's something that the Archie comics, at the very least once Ian Flynn took over, started doing really well.
Yeah.
Was like good reasons for Eggman and Sonic to be working for a mutual cause, and then for Eggman to turn right back around as soon as it's taken care of.
Yeah.
Something else I want to bring up that I was just kind of thinking about, especially with you just now mentioning like the government's involvement as a greater evil in SA2, even though it doesn't tie into Eggman's arc or plot and doesn't really get resolved. A lot doesn't get resolved actually at the end of SA2. Same for SA1, but like whatever, SA1 has a weird tone to it. It's kind of strange that it ends in a decimated, flooded city. But Sonic Adventure 2's tone is much more consistent than SA1's on that front. And it deals with heavier subject matter and stakes. And the fact that the game ends with, like, Eggman is just, well, I guess that all happened. I'm going to try to figure out some kind of moral from it, and I'm not going to talk to any of you for 6 months. And then leaves, and no one says anything, and Shadow dies, and no one reaches to pick up what he left behind in terms of resolving the real issue, which is that the government stormed his place of living in space, killed his sister, and then wrecked a bunch of stuff so that people wouldn't learn about the stuff Gerald was doing. Like, that doesn't end up going anywhere. There's no repercussion for any of those events, because what gets resolved is the space laser and nothing else. Sonic Adventure 2 is not worried about anything else coming to a head like that. So, Shadow dies, Eggman's not doing the space laser anymore, I guess everything's fine, is what SA2 says. And I don't think that's bad on its own. I think it's a little dissatisfying, but what makes it worse is that no game, not even Shadow the Hedgehog, picked up on that as a space they can use to, or let me rephrase that, pick that up as subject matter and plot they can continue to resolve those issues in the world.
Yeah.
And that's part of why we both believe that Sonic as a franchise should have more of an anti-authoritarian, anti-government corruption stance, like overtly, because it's a demonstrable theme of SA2, and then it's gone.
Yep. It gets weird in Shadow. Like, that's their only other opportunity that they took to explore that, and they don't do it.
No.
Like, they do it in a weird way.
They also make it a lot more... They do that thing that a lot of fiction, Western fiction, American fiction does in regards to racism and bigotry and corruption, of like, oh, it was actually the fault of this one person, and at that, it was a misunderstanding. That's more the direction Shadow the Hedgehog takes with the entirety of Shadow's backstory in SA2.
Yeah. They also just wanted to take Shadow and put him in Independence Day, so.
They sure did. You know, I feel like that gets overlooked a little bit in discussions of Shadow the Hedgehog, because it takes all too much effort to get to the point where you realize that's what's happening. Like,
God.
the alien invasion bit is there up front and center, but like the entirety of how Shadow the Hedgehog is kind of just Independence Day doesn't really settle in until you're at the end.
Yeah. They don't even have any fun with it.
No, they don't have any fun with it.
Man.
They have very little fun in that game.
Yeah. I think it's important to specify that, like, in that era, like, his character crescendos in like a maturity, but it's like a very boring maturity, like an unsalted cracker. Like, I understand that there's like a lot of nuance and interesting things going on in 06 with Shadow, but it's like you're dumping that in this game all at once. Like, good for him, but come on.
I would even say a lot of the stuff that I personally find interesting about Shadow in 06 is subtextual, because it's all based on an informed understanding of where he already was in the games prior, and not anything that's in 06 on its own. Honestly, that's probably why Shadow feels better in 06 and why Sonic feels substantially worse in 06, is because we all know the characters already. And then Silver just gets off on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
He gets better.
He gets better.
You know, aside from the times when he was voiced by Quentin Flynn, we don't worry about that. Oh boy.
Shadow shouldn't have died.
Ain't that the cap to it all? Shadow really should not have died.
He shouldn't have died. The fact that he died and like, okay, it's not... There's like several layers here.
Let's go by layer.
The outermost layer is that his character arc after SA2 is stupid. But it's stupid because they gave him amnesia.
Yeah.
And they gave him amnesia because he died. He shouldn't have died. It doesn't make sense for his character arc at all. Like, why would he sacrifice himself? Like, I don't care about the functional reason. He does it deliberately. He's like, he doesn't run out of rings. He just dies because he wants to die. He's fulfilled his purpose in his own eyes, which is stupid. Like,
Yeah.
Sonic's whole character is the opposite of that. He should have grabbed him and said, no, that's not
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah, like Shadow, I guess at the end of SA2 is looking for, I don't know, not like an easy way out, but like he's done what he's done and he's ready to not do anything else because he thinks that's enough. But
Yeah.
it's like you said in Sonic's voice, that's not how it works. There's always more you can do with yourself. You're not
Yeah.
defined by the singular event in your life that you've now resolved.
Yeah, it almost feels like they don't explicitly make it about this, but it could definitely be taken this way as like a romanticizing death thing, as like, oh, he's with Maria now. But like
Yeah.
he still didn't have to die. All he did was stop the Ark from crashing into Earth, which he is partially responsible for. Technically, he didn't even fulfill Maria's wish.
Yeah.
He just undid his misinterpretation of it.
Oh, that's funny and sad.
Yeah.
That coloring makes the ending so much worse, but it's true.
Yeah, like I like it in theory. The ending, not specifically him dying. Like
Mhm.
everything except that, I think is fine and good and resolute. But there was no reason to kill him. He should have been kept alive to continue living and continue his character arc, because that's, if you even wanted to remove it from being out of his own hands, that's what Maria would have wanted. Like, there's too many ways to justify it. Like, there's even dumb superficial ones. It just doesn't make sense. Because having him be a one-off character is like, okay, fine. And they brought him back because he was popular. Sure, but like I take death very seriously in video games, but like not particularly for a personal reason, but because I think there's a weight to having a character die, because then that character is not around anymore, and I don't like it when things try and get around that.
Mhm.
I am here as the local Aerith fan, so I think I know a bit about this.
It's the same problem as comics.
Yeah. Like,
Whatever writers are in the writer room are like, we can make people feel something if we kill this character off. And then the
Yeah.
next day they're like, we could do a lot if we had this character still.
yeah, it his death would have been meaningful if it made sense. Like, I'm surprised more people don't approach it from the angle of it personally making sense, because it doesn't. Everyone just harps on, like, why did he die? He still had rings. Sonic was fine. I don't care about that because, again, he did it on purpose.
Right. It's more that it says more about how they wanted to approach the event, that they didn't write in Sonic doing anything about it.
Yeah, it's honestly also out of character that he didn't.
They just wanted everyone to be able to give a eulogy for him.
Yep.
Which is weird.
Characters that knew him for like a week,
Exactly.
couple days maybe.
Yeah, Eggman knew him for a week, I think.
Yeah.
And like at the end of the day, you mentioned this, I think, in a previous recording we did, but Shadow would just have a much, much more satisfying character arc if he was forced to confront his own mortality and put in a situation where he had to keep going despite like now lacking the hooks to the life he had before confinement.
Yeah.
And it would make him more enjoyable character to follow.
Honestly, if they kept him alive and made him not lose his memories for Shadow, like if Shadow the Hedgehog still happened as a game, premise and all, it would be more interesting because it would be framed as like a past versus future thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my god.
do you stay hooked on the things that made you who you are, whether you have any personal attachment to that or not? Or do you stick with the things that, like, I guess, reshaped your person?
Yeah.
Like the things that changed you for the better, I guess.
Are you kidding me? That's such a more interesting premise than hero versus villain.
Yeah. Like if you played the game, you know. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just an excuse to let Shadow be whatever the player wants because they recognized he was popular but didn't want to do anything committal with him again.
and yet they still wanted to have their cake and eat it. They wanted to be able to eat their cake and then still have cake to eat after they've eaten it.
Yep.
By having the final story in Shadow the Hedgehog where he gets a definitive resolution to the arc that they manufactured out of nothing for him.
Yep.
And puts him in a firm nowhere space where he can still be anything.
Yep. And then he decided to be a cop, I guess.
Yeah, kind of sucks, huh?
Yeah. Wow.
Kind of related to me bringing up Friends at the Table earlier. Listening to Friends at the Table has made me realize how many characters in fiction are just cops, even if they're never explicitly called that. Because, minor spoilers for season 4 of Friends at the Table, Twilight Mirage, I guess. There's a small group of characters in that season where it seems like they're mostly doing good things, right? From the player character's perspective, from the way the camera is framing everything. But then, like, several episodes in, one character chooses to interact with an NPC in a certain way that's very like, I need you to give me this information. I need it so bad I'm going to start threatening. I'm going to make these kinds of demands. And it doesn't feel out of the ordinary until the GM, Austin Walker, is like, man, you guys are all such cops, huh? And everyone at the table is like, yeah, we're kind of playing cops. And it just, that little moment kind of made me realize there's a lot of characters in fiction that are just like that are very controlling, assertive of their power, interested in making scenarios go a certain way for themselves, at the behest of others, who are still framed as the heroes, the protagonists of the story, and they're just cops. Like they're just getting information on other people. They're gathering tools they can use to gain more control on other people or groups. They're stomping out resisting forces, and their just whole motivation is keeping a system running.
Which really puts Eggman in a weird spot.
Yeah. He's really not much of a cop.
He's a self-cop.
He's a self-cop. He's got his own subsystem that's completely dependent on the existing societal system, but also not related to it. Yeah. That he needs to keep running. And that's all he cares about.
Yep.
Ain't that funny?
See, now they have to make Sonic Adventure 3, and this has to be the plot.
Please, God.
I'm not even a Sonic Adventure 3 person. They just have to do that now.
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah, I would like some kind of follow-up. They don't even have to call it Sonic Adventure 3. I just want them to care about these specific things again.
If they really wanted to go nuts, they should make Sonic Adventure 3 and have it be an immediate follow-up to Sonic Adventure 2, and
That
like
would be
Shadow
cool.
crash lands and he just lives. It has his memories and there's just nothing. Like he's just
Oh
alive.
my god. I talk a lot on social media with friends about wishing Pokemon was more willing to retcon. And that's for a completely other reason, but just like now Sonic the Hedgehog has entered that same frame, that same
Yeah.
area in my mind of like, I really wish they'd be willing to just. They don't even do that much continuity, but the little continuity they try to do doesn't work. Just go back. You're allowed to go back. You can do things over again. You can tell people we've decided this stuff didn't happen. Mortal Kombat did it well. Mortal Kombat came back and was like, we're going to do a time travel plot where we invalidate the last 7 games that came out in the franchise because we want to distance ourselves from them. Get ready for Mortal Kombat 9. New stuff is happening, and it's better. And other franchises can do that too.
Yeah. See, like, I wouldn't even be opposed. But okay, here's my one problem is that by doing that, there would be even more weird timeline stuff going on than there already is. And there's exactly one entire weird timeline thing, and that's apparently too much for some people.
A lot of people are really resentful of the whole Two Worlds thing also.
That too. I mean, if you went back and just did like Sonic Adventure 3 and it's literally just a follow-up, immediate follow-up that retcons everything subsequent, that would technically go away too because you would have an opportunity to like do something about that. And like if you never did anything that would demonstrate that anyway, it wouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm. The other thing there is that the entire Sonic's universe is 2 separate worlds thing has only ever been talked about in interviews and the like.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have a bearing on the games individually because some of them take place in one world, quote unquote, and some take place in the other. And you just kind of implicitly know, but you're never asked to examine the relationship between them or ask how Sonic goes from one to another, if they're related at all, if they're even in the same continuity, if it's the same Sonic, any of these things. Like, they're not worried about that, but they still want to keep this idea up.
Which
I'd be down for a retcon. I don't want a reboot at this point. I would be down for a retcon.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think the only game that has any semblance of a demonstration of like, oh, this is explicitly the other world, like not even the relationship between the two, but complete admittance that there is a second world is Forces, because like there's animal people
Mm-hmm.
and now they have their own cities and towns, and that's like completely separate from like Station Square and places where humans live. Whereas in every single game prior, you could assume that it was just the one universe, the one planet. You're just on different parts of it. Like, there's no reason why Sonic Colors can't take place just above the world that is Sonic Unleashed. And Sonic Unleashed is obviously going to be the same world as like Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Adventure. It's just that those specific locales aren't explicitly there. Like, you're not going to them in the game.
I wouldn't mind the implication that what's it called in Sonic Unleashed? The not New York, Empire City. I wouldn't mind the implication that Empire City is at least on the same continent as Station Square or Central City.
Yeah.
I guess Station Square can be anywhere.
Yeah.
But definitely Central City, since they're both inspired by real United States locations.
The real thing is that Eggman Land in Unleashed is actually the remains of Station Square because they never rebuilt it.
Oh my god. That's real. That's actually real. I'll buy that.
For $1?
I'll buy that for $15 to $20 used at GameStop.
Okay, because you can't buy it for rings.
Yeah, I also don't have enough anyway. I've only got one, and it came with Sonic Mania.
Okay, but I mean they're not currency, so.
I mean, Unleashed they are. Oh, you're making a Sega Mandates joke, aren't you? Oh. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk About Sonic. I'm Crepe. You can find me on Twitter at CrappyBlue.
I'm Mitt. You could find me on Twitter at MitsumiMario.
And we'll see you in the next zone when we've passed Act 3 and made a good future in Sonic Adventure 2 and go on to whatever the heck we're going to talk about next. Thank you for sticking it with us.